Hello, welcome to the Scratch Made Life Kitchen. My name is Kim, and today we're going to make Cambozola cheese. You might have heard it called Cam Blue. About 1950 something, a German cheesemaker wanted to find out what would happen when he put together Camembert and Roquefort, and that's when Cambozola was born. All right, so let's get started. So the nice difference between a lot of your cheeses and Cambozola is that it's got heavy cream in it. Now, just like with your milk, you want to find heavy cream that has not been ultra pasteurized. Most of it is. If you can't, it will still work. This is one of the exceptions to the never use ultra pasteurized, but it will be even more difficult to work with. So we start by adding our milk and our cream, and it's 2 to 1. So a gallon of milk and a half a gallon or 2 quarts of heavy cream. Going to add it to your stainless steel pot, heat that up to 86 degrees with the lid off, and then you're going to turn the heat off. After you turn off the heat, you're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of your mesophilic culture. If you're using raw milk, add half of that. And then you're going to add 1/8 teaspoon of your Penicillium candidum. Now, you don't have to write this all down. You're going, Kim, how do you spell that? Don't worry about it. You can find the recipe on the website, scratchmadelife.com. It's all there for you, all spelled out and everything. Penicillium candidum creates that white bloom on the outside of a camembert or a brie. And then you have your Penicillium roqueforti, which is your blue powder. Now, Kim, what's with all the Tupperware? Well, these are 3 very different products. And with the blue powder and the Penicillium candidum, there is concern of cross-contamination. If I kept them loosely opened all together, who knows what I would have? Even if I just was making a cheddar using the meso culture, if it got infected with the blue, then I would have a blue cheddar. And I have made that, so it's not such a bad thing. It's pretty good. But you have to keep them in separate containers. If you only have one freezer, keep them spread out as well as possible. Fortunately, I have multiple freezers, so everybody's in a different freezer. And that helps to make sure I don't have the cross-contamination problem. So we're going to start with the meso culture. Now, because I'm using raw milk, I'm only going to use 1/8 teaspoon. If you're using regular milk, you're going to use 1/4. And you get it out of your container here, a level measurement, and then you tap on it and just spread it around your milk. And let's put this aside because I don't want any cross-contamination. Then you're going to get a paper towel. Invest in paper towels, you're going to use a lot. And I'm going to add my Penicillium candidum, which again makes the white mold. So let's see, that's the right one. And I'm going to use 1/8 teaspoon for this recipe. And again, level measurement. Tap it around. The reason we're doing this is so that I can get it evenly distributed through the milk. All right, let's get this. We're gonna put this over here. And I'm going to clean it off. Now the next step, you don't have to do if you don't want to. I have added this step because I find it adds just a little tiny extra bit of blue flavor to it. And you're gonna take your Penicillium roqueforti and you're going to measure a level 1/8 teaspoon. Same thing. Do it like that. Sprinkle over the top. Sprinkle, 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 sprinkle. Now, all of these are dehydrated, so we need to rehydrate them for a little bit. So we're going to put our lid on the top of our cheese, our milk. It's not cheese yet. It's still just milk. And we're going to let it sit for about 5 minutes to rehydrate the powders and the culture. Now, what the culture does is it helps to add the flavor to your cheese. So this is a very important step, and it's very important that it gets throughout your milk. Now 5 minutes is up, we're gonna say, and we're gonna stir it. Now this slotted spoon with the bent handle is awesome. I got it online for like $9 because in cheese making we stir up and down. So, and then with the slots, everything goes through them, and it just helps to get everything really equally distributed through the milk. And that's important. We want to completely inoculate the milk with everything we're using. All right, it's going to take about 15 to 20 stirs to get this done. All right, now you're going to put your lid on it. Now the reason you keep putting your lid on it is it helps to maintain the temperature, because you want to maintain the temperature at 85 degrees all the way through the process until the point where you cut your curds. And you do that by leaving the lid on and using a stainless steel pot with a reinforced bottom. That alone will help you keep at or within about 2 degrees of the temperature that you want to keep it at. So in this case, it's 86 degrees, all right? So we're gonna say our 15 minutes is up. It's all nice and ripe, but now this is what I love. You take the lid off. Oh, that smell is wonderful. And our next step is to add the rennet. And the rennet starts the process of separating the curds in the whey. So you take a little ramekin like this, you put about 1/4 cup of water in it that does not contain chlorine. Chlorine will destroy the good bacteria that we're trying to develop in our cheeses, and the good bacteria is what makes the wonderful flavor. And then we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of rennet. Now I have vegetable liquid rennet here. I like it because I have vegetarians in my life, and if I use it, they can eat my cheese. If you want to use animal rennet, use animal rennet. If you want to use the tablets, use the tablets. They all work equally well. It's just a matter of preference. I like the liquid. It's much easier. I don't have to wait for it to dissolve. So I'm going to pour a beaded 1/4 teaspoon. So it means it kind of beads over the top there. And I'm going to put it in the water and stir it up a little bit. The reason I do the water is because that's such a small amount, it's kind of hard to get it equally distributed through the milk. And using the water helps us to do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it through the holes in the spoon, and I'm going to move the spoon around while I'm pouring, so that it helps to get equal distribution. And again, we're going to do this up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And again, about 15 to 20 times. Go all the way around the pot, get in the middle, make sure everything's mixed in there really well. Now, if you're not using raw milk, you're going to want to use calcium chloride. Calcium chloride helps repair a lot of the damage done by the pasteurization process. You're going to add the same amount of calcium chloride in the same manner as your rennet. So you would use 1/4 teaspoon of calcium chloride in 1/4 cup of unchlorinated water, and you would add it before the rennet. The reason being, the second that rennet hits the milk, it's going to start to set up. And if you add the calcium chloride after the rennet, it's not going to get all the way through the milk. All right, so let's put the lid on here. We're going to put it back on the stove, or we're going to let it somewhere not on the heat, and we're going to let it sit for an hour. It sits for a long time. Now let's come here. It's been an hour. I know, I did this earlier. And now we're going to do what's called check for a clean break. A clean break is the moment that the curds and the whey start to cleanly break from each other. So what you're going to do is you're going to take whatever you're going to use as a curd cutter. I just use an icing knife. And you're going to push it down in the center. And if you see a clear liquid start to come up, that means you've achieved a clean break. I like to just push down on the center. Some people go right through the middle and pull it apart. Some people pull it away from the edge. I just like to make a little hole in the center, let it go, and see if it fills up with the whey. Now, because we're using cream, those of you that have made cheese before, you're going to find this is softer, and the whey is a little milky colored. So expect that. It's not going to be the perfect clean break you're used to if you've made other cheeses. So at this point, we're going to cut a checkerboard of both horizontal and vertical curds. And just gently take your curd knife or whatever you're going to use to cut your curds. No need to spend extra money if you've already got tools at home. And you cut it through here in 1-inch cubes. Now, you don't have to use surgical precision, just get close. Now, when I'm doing the cuts this way, I'm going to start towards the top, and do this. And then I'm going to go down a little further and come across, and down a little further and across. And then you have to do it over here too. Now there's things called curd harps that you can use, but they only come in one size. So if you need 1/2 inch and 1 inch and 3/8 inch, you have to buy 2 different harps. Do it this way. So now you've just cut your curds. You can put the lid back on. You're going to let them sit for 5 minutes to kind of rest and firm up a little bit. Because of the cream, this is a really fragile curd. So this is an important step right here. So 5 minutes. We're going to say 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay, it's been 5 minutes. Don't skip this step. 5 minutes. Let it sit. And then what you're going to do is you're going to stir your curds for 5 to 10 minutes. So you can break up any large curds you might find. So I'm looking here and did a pretty good job here of cutting these curds up. They look nice and even. You can see the liquid, you can see the curd. And so we say 5 to 10 minutes. With raw milk, it's not going to take quite as long. And it's raw milk, it tends to behave a little bit better. If you're using pasteurized, homogenized, it's going to take probably the full 10 minutes. You'll see your curds starting to reduce in a little size a little bit, and that's the way working its magic still. All right, those are looking really good. That was pretty quick. So your next step is to put the lid back on and let them rest for 5 minutes. And what's happening right now is the curds in the way are separating. The curds are heavier, so they're sinking to the bottom of the pot. And that's going to help you to pull some whey off the top before you start filling your molds. And while we're letting that sit, I'm going to show you what your setup's going to look like. It's going to be very different than what you're used to doing for other cheeses. So you are going to need a draining rack. So you want to get a baking sheet like this, and then a draining sheet or a cooling rack. Put your cooling rack inside your baking sheet. Now you're going to need a cheese mat. Or if you want to save a bunch of money, this is the plastic canvas they use for embroidery. And then you're going to put it down on top. The reason you need to do this is because we're not using any cheesecloth, and we're using this open bottom camembert mold. And if I didn't do this, all my curds would just come out the bottom right there. So we're going to do that. And then for a little extra security, and for another reason, which I'll show you in a minute, I'm going to take a mat that I've cut to size, and I'm going to put each of my molds on top of another mat. And that's just extra security for me, knowing that I'm not going to lose much in the way of curds. So now there's 2 ways you can do this. Let's take our lid off. You can just take your spoon and place your curds in the mold. And that's the way most instructions tell you to do it. Or, if you don't want to battle with it too much, I take a strainer like this, and I put curd in it. And then I use a spoon or my curd knife, and I gently help to encourage the whey here to drain out. Not completely, just a little bit. And usually I would do this over the sink. Doesn't make a lot of sense to put your whey back in there when you want to get it out, right? And then see, it's still draining like crazy, but I don't want it to drain completely. I want it to do its process. And then you're going to pour it in the mold. Now, we're going to get our Penicillium roqueforti again. And we're going to sprinkle just a little bit across the top. And this is where your 1/8 of a teaspoon comes in. You might end up using a little more. You might end up using a little less. This is kind of your call. If you want more blue flavor, use a little more. And again, with this tap tap on it and around the top. And then you're going to let it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes. And you're going to repeat the process. You're going to have 2 layers of the blue powder, and you're going to have 3 layers of curd. And you're going to do that. This will probably get you 3 molds full. Now, if it comes all the way to the top, put some weight on the top, because sometimes it'll slip a little bit, especially if your surface isn't even, and you'll come back and go, oh, all my curds. Now, if that happens, don't worry about it. Do the best you can to scrape those curds out, put them right back into the mold, all right? Well, let's get this out of our way. I will come back and I will finish that later. Let's move that over here. Now it's been draining for a little while, about 6 to 8 hours. It's super fragile, so don't worry about it. Take your time. You have it, I have it here because I started one yesterday. I took another mat and I put it on the top. I'm gonna grab it like that. I'm gonna grab the bottom and I'm gonna flip. Now, I don't know if you can see through the mold, but it's not just flipping like your brie. As a matter of fact, it's being kind of stubborn, which is what I would expect because it's super fragile. Now this one has been sitting, and I've flipped it about 4 times. It's been sitting for about 24 hours, and that's about how long it's gonna take. Let's see if it's solid enough that I can lift the mold up very gently. Now, if as you lift it up, you start to see it kind of bulge out a little bit, put it straight down. Any that your mold cuts off, put it back in the top, flip it over. Okay, that looks good. That looks really good right there. Take a peek. So at this point, you are going to salt the cheese. This doesn't go in a brine. You salt it, and you just take a nice pinch and you put it evenly over the top. And I like to let it sit out for about an hour, just like this, before I flip it. But because I know you don't want to hang out for an hour, we're gonna do it together. Again, let's do the sandwich thing. This is so fragile, if you try to do it with your hands, it'd go on you, and we don't want that. So you're gonna flip it over like that. Take a pinch, put it over the top, let it sit for about another hour. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna put it in your draining container. Your draining container, for me, I just use a Tupperware. For the first few days, I put a paper towel in the bottom of it because there's gonna be a lot of moisture, and then you're gonna put a draining mat in the bottom. So I'm gonna take my draining mat that I'm gonna use, I'm gonna put it on the top of my cheese, and I'm gonna flip it like that, and I'm gonna keep a hold of it, just like a sandwich, really delicate, like an ice cream sandwich that might be getting ready to melt. And I put it in my container. Then I take my lid, and I put it on the top. I don't seal it because it needs that oxygen for that bloom to happen around it. And then I take a Sharpie and I write Cambozola, the date created, and in 7 days I want to pierce it. So I'm going to write that date down there too. And I'm going to put it in my cheese cave at 52 to 55 degrees. And I'm going to flip it in the morning, and I'm going to flip it at night. And I'm going to do it using that sandwiching process that I told you. I am not going to touch it with my hands. It's going to be very, very, very soft because of the cream. Now, it's been 4 to 7 days. You're going to want to pierce it. Just take a kebab like this. Now, it might be firm enough to handle with your hands at this point, but why take a chance? Now you can see the white bloom is already starting. You can also see the blue is already starting. So if it looks like that, it's wonderful. It's not bad mold, it's good mold. Take a kebab stick, and I'm going to pierce it all the way through. And I'm going to do it around the top about 10 to 12 times. Less for less blue flavor, more for more blue flavor. This helps to oxygenate the blue powder and create the growth of the blue flavor in the cheese. So through the top, And then also through the side a few times. And I never do this straight, and that's just fine. Be careful not to poke yourself as it comes out the other side there. You're gonna do that 2 or 3 times. Do one more. See, right out the top, every time. And I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna put it back in my draining container with the lid loose and put it back in the cheese cave until it completely blooms. I like it just at the point where it's bloomed. Then your next step, we're gonna pretend this is completely bloomed. It's not quite, I made it at the same time as the other one, is to wrap it. So once it's completely bloomed, you're gonna wrap it, and this is one of the things I do recommend you get that's cheese specific, is this tin for blue cheeses. The outside is foil, the inside is a parchment-like paper. And then you just take your cheese. At this point, it's probably stable enough that you can handle it by hand. You might have to cut this down, and we are. I know I have scissors over here. Bring it there, just cut it down. It doesn't have to be perfect. And just wrap it. Not like a Christmas present. Just kind of round and round. Loosely. Still needs to breathe a little bit. This will not completely stop the bloom, but it will slow it down significantly. And what's going to happen now is, because it's been ripening on the outside and the outside can't do that anymore, it's going to start ripening on the inside. It's going to get enough oxygen to it that your blue can develop, but not so much that your bloom doesn't take over the cheese. So just write on here, and you're going to be able to eat this in about 4 weeks after date of production. So if you made it on January 1st, it would be ready about January 31st. So that is how you make Cambozola cheese. Again, the recipe is at our website, scratchmadelife.com. Would love to hear how it turns out for you. And if any questions, feel free to contact me through our contact tab on the website. Thank you guys. Go forward and make some wonderful cheese. Take care. Bye now.